I got to ask you something that you said also to me on Sunday, is that you thought that at the time former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper was too definitive when he said no evidence of collusion at the time that he served through essentially January 20th.
And former National Security Chief James Clapper said there's no collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign.
Russian officials.
We did not include any evidence in our report, and I say our, that's NSA, FBI, and CIA with my office, the Director of National Intelligence, that had any reflection of collusion between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was no evidence of that included in our report.
I understand that, but does it exist?
Not to my knowledge.
What basis can you feel confident saying that the Director of National Intelligence oversold something?
Well, look, I don't think it was deliberate on the director's part, but all I can tell you is, reviewing the evidence that I have, I don't think you can conclude that at all. Far from it.
But you admit it's all you have right now is a circumstantial case.
Actually, no, Chuck. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. So, again, I think...
So you have seen direct evidence of collusion?
I don't want to go into specifics, but I will say that there is evidence that is not circumstantial and is very much worthy of investigations.
To members of the Trump campaign and the Russians, there was no evidence of that included in our report. Chuck Todd then asked, I understand that, but does it exist? You say, no, not to my knowledge. Is that still accurate?
It is.
And to me, it underscores the importance of having an independent commission look at this as a supplement to anything the Congress does.
Comey said even when he was fired, no evidence of collusion. That squares with what Lisa Page told us, that 10 months in, there was no there. I mean, here we are, still no evidence of collusion. Comey said it, Page said it.
And yes, the issue of collusion with the Trump campaign. There is significant evidence, much of it in the public domain, on the issue of collusion.
The FBI reportedly spent several months investigating Russia's potential meddling in the U.S. election and found no direct link to Donald Trump.
Whether there is this compromise on the president, we don't know. Obviously, we're trying to find out. But he certainly acts like a president that is compromised. And what ultimately matters to the country is how he acts. And he acts like the Russians have something on him. It's just what has become public. Some of the public information is very much in line with what is reported in that dossier. I think people put too much focus on the salacious allegations within the dossier about that video, as if that's really what the dossier is about. That's the least significant part of the dossier from my point of view. The only parts of the dossier that were included were those that pertain to Carter Page, and some of that was corroborated. We set this out in our responsive memo. So it's very important for people to understand, contrary to the very misleading impression that the GOP gives, the salacious video and all that stuff, that was not part of the FISA application, only the parts pertinent to Carter Page. And there was corroboration of some of those very important elements.
I never saw any evidence of it, as I've stated publicly.
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight. Now, that's a different statement than saying that there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a criminal conspiracy. Bob Mueller will have to determine that. But, of course, the entire meeting at Trump Tower...
You acknowledge that the FBI has not presented it thus far. I'm drawing this distinction because this is what the White House is arguing here, that the president is drawing a distinction, that he is saying when he says hoax and witch hunt that he means one thing and that it's not really trying to disassociate himself from what his national security team says.
Well, first of all, we haven't seen what Bob Mueller has produced in terms of the evidence yet. So in terms of FBI proof, they're not going to present proof to the Congress. We're doing our own investigation, and we've revealed evidence, I think, that certainly goes to the issue of conspiracy and collusion, a lot of which is now public.
Have you seen any evidence of any collusion between what I'll call Trump world and the Russians to swing the 2016 presidential election?
I'll give you a very simple answer. No. Legal about an incoming president, who's not president yet, a president-elect Trump at that time, telling a foreign power that the sanctions imposed by the current president of the United States, well, This is something, hey, when there's a new sheriff in town, things will be different. Would that amount to illegal activity in your view?
Well, it could. Collusion, the criminal charge would be conspiracy.
Jane.
After my election, I have more flexibility.
I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir and
The New York Times report said the FBI concluded that Russia was far more interested in disrupting the American political process than in aiding Trump.
It turns out, according to new reports, the FBI may have had a spy in or interacting with the Trump campaign during the 2016 election, a government spy in the campaign.
The most I can tell you, Chuck, is that this claim by the president, the suggestion by Giuliani that there is a political spy embedded in the Trump campaign is nonsense. And you hear it in the same terms that Trump often speaks, which is people are saying, or I'm hearing, or we're being told. That's another way of saying this is patently untrue, but we would like to spread it anyway.
Essentially, that information was laundered through the State Department and potentially the U.S. Senate, and we know there was potentially a human asset in the Trump campaign. Unbelievable.
Is there any precedence for this? Has this ever happened before? Has it ever been alleged before in a presidential campaign?
Not in the United States. I'm sure it's happened in some spy novels and in some third world countries where this may be common. But Tucker, this is a story so unbelievable on its face that I've said to people, it's like the sickest spy novel I've ever read, except it actually happened.
As you said, this would have been a phone call away for the president himself or for anyone at the Justice Department. The day it happened, they could have made a phone call to see whether or not there was a wiretap. What's your suspicion about why we haven't found out yet?
Well, my suspicion was that, of course, the president made this baseless claim. I assumed from watching something on TV or getting some tidbit of information and deciding that, this has served him well throughout his life, lobbying these baseless accusations, and there's been no price that he's had to pay, so why not? Well, it's quite fitting in the Trump administration that Donald Trump would come to the defense of someone who has acknowledged that is, Carter Page acknowledged being an informal advisor to the Kremlin.
I've been covering this for 18 months. Give me one piece of evidence of collusion or a crime involving the president or his associates involving their campaign.
Kremlin. Look, the FBI had probable cause to believe that Carter Page might be acting as an agent of a foreign power, of Russia. They submitted an application and extensions that were approved by 4 different judges that were appointed by 3 different Republican presidents, and there was ample evidence to warrant the approval of those 5 applications. The president is counting on people not to read them.
Sins, but I don't see any crimes. Collusion itself is not a crime. Using information given by Russia to WikiLeaks would not be a crime unless the campaign participated with WikiLeaks in the hacking itself, and there's no evidence to support that.
There's a very real prospect that on the day Donald Trump leaves office, the Justice Department may indict him, that he may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time. We have been discussing the issue of pardons that the president may offer to people or dangle in front of people. The bigger pardon question may come down the road as the next president has to determine whether to pardon Donald Trump.
I think it's very important to underscore what Byron just said. Not a single charge in any of the crimes that Mueller has brought involve a conspiracy by anybody in the Trump campaign or Trump himself to deal with Russians, Russian governmental officials, Russian business people, Russian political people, Russian comedians, Russian grocery store keepers, nothing involving a criminal conspiracy. In fact, all of the allusions to Michael Cohen's attempts to get at Michael Cohen by Russians are simply described as things that happened. They are not described as parts of a crime. So the notion that there was some sort of conspiracy described in today's multiple pleadings is false reporting of the worst kind. It is hopeful reporting. It is anticipatory.